This house ain't messy. You ought to see my house. I have. And if you had any sense of a billy goat, you'd try help out around your house instead of bumming around. Shoot, kid, if I was ever if I ever did that, my mom would die of shock. I like Two-Bit's mother. She had the same good sense of humor and easygoing way that he did. She was kind of lazy like him, but she let him get away with murder. I don't know, though. It's just about impossible to get mad at him. When we had finished, I pulled on Daly's brown leather jacket. The back was burned black, and I started for 10th Street. I would drive us, Two-Bit said, as we walked up the street, trying to thumb a ride, but the brakes are out on my car. Almost killed me and Kathy the other night. He flipped his collar on the black leather jacket up to serve as a windbreak while he lit a cigarette. You ought to see Kathy's brother. Now, there's a hood. He's so greasy, he glides when he walks. He goes to the barber just for an oil change, not a haircut. I would have laughed, but I had a terrific headache. I stopped at Tasty Freeze to buy Cokes and rest up, and a blue Mustang that had been trailing us for 8 blocks pulled in. I almost decided to run, and Two-Bit must have guessed this, for he shook his head ever so slightly and tossed me a cigarette. As I lit up, the Socs who had jumped Johnny and me at the park hopped out of the Mustang. I recognized Randy Ederson, Marcia's boyfriend, and the tall guy that had almost drowned me. I hated them. It was their fault Bob was dead. Their fault Johnny was dying. Their fault Soda and I might get put in a boys' home. I hated them bitterly and contemptuously as Daly Winston hated. Two-Bit put an elbow on my shoulder and leaned against me, dragging on his cigarette. You know the rules. No jazz before the rumble, he said to the Socs. We know, Randy said. He looked at me. Come here. I want to talk to you. I glanced at Two-Bit. He shrugged. I followed Randy over to his car, at earshot of the rest. We sat there in his car for a second silently. Golly, that's the toughest car I've ever been in. I read about you in the paper today. I read about you in the paper, Randy said finally. How come? I don't know. Maybe I just felt like playing hero. I wouldn't have. Let those kids burn to death. You might not have. You might have done the same thing. Randy pulled out a cigarette and pressed into the car lighter. I don't know. I don't know anything anymore. I would have believed a greaser could pull off something like that. Greaser? Didn't have anything to do with it. My buddy over there would have done it too. Maybe you would have done the same thing. Maybe a friend of yours would have. It's an individual. It's the individual. I'm not going to show up for the Rumble tonight, Randy said slowly. I took a good look at him. He was 17 or so, but he was already old, like Dallas was old. Cherry had said her friends were too cool to feel anything, and yet she could remember watching sunsets. Randy was supposed to be too cool to feel anything, and yet there was pain in his eyes. I'm sick of all this, sick and tired. Bob was a good guy. He was the best buddy a guy ever had. I mean, he was a good fighter and tough and everything, but he was a real person too. You dig? I nodded. He's dead. The mother has had a nervous breakdown. His mother has had nervous breakdown. They spoiled him rotten. I mean, most parents would have been proud of a kid, like good looking and smart and everything, but they gave in to him all the time. He kept trying to make someone say no, and they never did. They never did. And that's what he wanted, for someone to tell him no, to have somebody lay down the law, set limits. He give him something solid to stand on. That's what we all really want. One time, Randy tried to grin, but until he was close to tears. One time he came home drunker than anything. He thought for sure they were going to raise the roof. You know what they did? They thought it was something they'd done. They thought it was their fault, and they'd failed him, driven him to something. They took all the blame and didn't do anything to him. His old man had just belted him once, just once. He might still be alive. I don't know why I'm telling you this. I couldn't tell anyone else. My friends, they'll think I'm off my rocker, turning soft. Maybe I am. I just know I'm sick of the whole mess. That kid, your buddy, the one that got burned, he might die. Yeah, I said, trying not to think about Johnny. And tonight, people get hurt in rumbles, maybe killed. I'm sick if I'm sick of it because it doesn't do any good. You can't win. You know, you know that, don't you? And when I remained silent, he went on. You can't win. Even if you whip us, you'll still be where you were before, at the bottom. And we'll still be the lucky ones with all the breaks. So it doesn't do any good, the fighting and the killing. It doesn't prove anything. We'll forget it if you win or if you don't. Greasers will still be greasers and socials will still be socials. Sometimes I think the ones in the middle are the lucky stiffs. He took a deep breath. So I'd fight if I thought it'd do any good. I think I'm going to leave town. Take my little old Mustang and all my dough I can carry and get out. Running away won't help. Oh, hell, I know it, Randy half sobbed. But what can I do? I'm a marked chicken. If I punch out at the rumble, and I'd hate myself if I didn't, I don't know what to do. I'd help you if I could, I said. I remembered Sherry's voice. Things are rough all over. I knew what she meant. He looked at me. No, you wouldn't. I'm a soch. You get a little money and the whole world hates you. No, I said, you hate the whole world. He just looked at me. From the way he looked, I could have been 10 years older than he was. I got out of the car. You would have saved those kids if you had been there, I said. You'd have saved them the same as we did. Thanks, Grease, he said, trying to grin. Then he stopped. I mean that. I meant thanks, kid. My name's Ponyboy, he said. Nice talking to you, Randy. I walked over to Two-Bit and Randy honked for his friends to come to get into his car. What'd he want? Two-Bit said. What'd Mr. Super Soak have to say? He ain't a soak, I said. He's just a guy. He just wanted to talk. You want to see a movie before we go see Johnny in Dallas? Nope, I said, lighting up another weed. I still have a headache, but I feel better. Socias are just guys after all. Things are rough all over. But it was better that way. That way, you could tell the other guy is human too.